We are excited to have this presentation called History in Three Dimensions from Christopher Wilczewski of Functional 3D and Functional 3D Scans. And he'll share a little more about how his company is helping historic scholarship by working with Kathyabbas of the Rhode Island Marine Archeology Project, scanning historic artifacts and other local sites. And he will be joined by Dr. Kathyabbas during this presentation and conversation. So with that, I will pass it over to Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Avi and Tuni, and particularly Amy. I didn't know that my post spurred this whole conversation today. So
it's something I wanted to do, and then I'm
very flattered. So thank you very much.
So yeah,
appreciate it. Yes, thank you everyone for joining today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share both who I am and what Functional 3D is doing, and our work with Rhode Island Marine Archeology Project. It's a really great opportunity and a really great organization that I've been able to become engaged with and support. So as mentioned, Dr. Kathyabbas will be sharing some of the work that we did and specifically talking to that. So to kind of get things started, kind of who am I and where did I? So there's a little shot of me. I always like fun little intros. I was one of my first jobs was to be Aladdin at Walt Disney World in Florida. So there's a little icebreaker there for you. But now I am. This is my life right here. So I've been in most of my professional career. I've been involved in consulting and sales of technology. Started off in the world of displays, bare module displays, but I've consistently worked with engineering and designers throughout my career in supporting them. So here's some shots of what Functional 3D has been doing since I started it up. You can see some Faro products in those shots. Faro was my past employer. I worked for them, and they are pretty big in the world of creating the devices to bring the world into 3D world into the computer. So being able to capture the world in 3 dimensions is not an easy process. It requires a lot of technology, both in the hardware and software spaces. And then over in the corner, there is my toddler walking around in my shoes, and then my dog Buster in the background, just being like, what is going on here? So that's a little bit about who I am, where I came from, and why I've been doing this. So as we kind of talk about where this leads into the history piece of things, I want to give people some insights. I want to give everyone some insights into what are the technologies being utilized in this world. So on the starting side, you have cameras. You can use SLRs or your cell phone, and some really high processing software. Takes some time to do, but you can take photos and bring them in and create 3-dimensional models. So there is a method for just about anyone to kind of dip a toe in this industry. Next up is handheld scanning. So this is for your medium to larger sized objects. You can scan in, everything from some small handheld sized objects up to maybe about a car sized, and it's just really pretty easy to move through. There is some processing that's done after the fact to get to the model creation, but it's a method for capturing data. Next, you have a scan arm. So it has a base that piece on the far right would mount to a table or a tripod, and you can use that to capture information. I think you see right there in the center over at RIMAP, one of the demonstrations I did utilizing one of those. There's the scan arm being able to capture in that data. And these are also used in quality control as well. Very little processing on the back end, so a really fast way to get that data quickly captured and starting to work with it. Additionally, for large objects is the laser scanner. I have one of those behind me. And this can scan everything from rooms to buildings to surveys, roads, large swaths of land. Some of them can shoot information up to 1 kilometer away. So you can actually capture in at a very high level of accuracy, about 1 millimeter of level of accuracy at that distance. For some automated processing of smaller objects, we have structured light, which is stationary. And so it would sit on a tripod, and you have an automated turntable that would then turn your object and capture that a full 360. And you can quickly bring that into the computer and start working with it. And finally, everything we've talked about so far relies on light, either visible or in the case of laser scanning and some of the structured light, handheld infrared light. So it's all dealing with light bouncing off an object and being able to capture that information. CT scanning is a little bit different. It's one of the only ones that allows you to see internals. In history capacity, you've probably seen mummies and other objects like that being scanned, but it can really go beyond that. I know Kathy, they have done some work with some of the objects that have just been encrusted in sediment. And so being able to capture that information is really valuable, and being able to see through what you can't see with light, basically. So where are all these technologies used, and where is functional 3D kind of supporting different industries? So we're going to be talking today primarily on historical preservation. Mostly we're going to be talking about smaller objects. Kathy will be going into some of the actual large underwater areas that they also have captured. But it also includes not just small objects, but large ones as well. Buildings and historical sites can be captured in just as easily. Next up, I want to mention industrial design. So this is anything you may need to get the real world into the computer to work around. A little example I have that I did recently. I do some drone work as well to be able to capture high up spaces. And here's a custom fit piece to store my drone in. So I can put this right in my backpack without worry of it getting crushed. And I was able to design that specifically from the scan data of that drone. And so you can imagine just about everything you encounter, everything you look around your room, it has an interface with either you or something else. And so being able to understand the dimensions of what it's connecting to is really important and highly valuable in the design space. Architecture and construction, we mentioned that laser scanner can capture in buildings. On the front end, so on the design side of architecture and construction, you have the scanning piece. It's called as-built. So what is there? So being able to take maybe a historical building and be able to get an exact understanding so you can add on to it, continue the construction of it, build it out, or maybe rehab it. Another example in the historical space is going to be the Cathedral of Notre Dame that had the fire recently. That was scanned interior. And so they're able to use that data to start rebuilding it and bringing it back with that information. So that's going to be the as-built side, recreating, and you see the piping right there in the photo. Another purpose for as-built would be in these mechanical rooms, being able to tie into a very complex series of piping. You may have limited room when you're designing maybe a new line to run through there. You want to make sure you're not running into anything. So you need to understand what's there very accurately in full 3 dimension. And that can be hard with tape measures. On the back end is the quality side. So you can imagine a large construction firm, a general contractor, dealing with multiple subs, making sure that things are going in on time, on schedule, and properly. So they're not running into something. The plumber may have put a line in place, and then now the HVAC team gets on site. They try to start doing their work to spec, and turns out there's a pipe in their way that shouldn't be there. So if you can catch those types of things beforehand, it really, really helps. And when you're dealing with projects that are in the millions and sometimes billions of dollars, that's a huge cost savings. There's big numbers attached to those types of savings and that type of efficiency. And then especially in the construction piece, waste, right? Being able to kind of going along with Toonie is passionate about being able to reduce waste in that capacity. Manufacturing, often mostly used on the quality side of things, being able to check your part for dimensional accuracy, even while it's going through the process. You can see a CNC mill there. And then we'll move on to a very similar process to what we're talking about for historical preservation, but film and video games. Oftentimes you want as realistic of a world as possible, particularly in film. And so being able to quickly gather that information, if you could imagine trying to draw the real world in 3D, it would take you quite a bit of time. Whereas if you can scan it and bring that in, not only does it give you that realism of the real world because you took the information right there, but it's also quite a bit faster than if someone were to hand draw or try to digitally 3D model a large space of land. And so that can be used in many different ways, from set extensions to props. So those are some other ways that this type of technology is and functional 3D is supporting. But today we're going to focus in on the historical spot. But I'm actually going to go a little bit off topic. And the reason I want to do that is because I think there's a real understanding, and it's going to tie everyone into what we're going to be talking about today. So augmented reality and engagement. And the reason I'm going to go into this is actually shopping. Just about everyone's had a lot of shopping experience in their life. So we're going to talk about traditional shopping, and you can liken this to going to, say, a museum in the historical space. So at traditional shopping, you've got things like transportation involved. So that's time consuming to get to and from there. You also have the time that it takes to move around a space. So you can think, even museums are typically fairly large. Moving around them to see one exhibit or another is quite time consuming. But on the positives, you have hands-on ability. You get that real connection, in some cases fully hands-on, where you can touch some of the objects, or you just get that experience of being in the same room and seeing it in space and the scale of whatever you're looking at. I think the Mona Lisa is a great example here. Many people think it's quite a bit larger than it actually is. So being able to experience it in your space is highly valuable, whether it be shopping or a piece of art or history. You also get to ask questions when you're there, being able to interact with other people. And in the case of shopping, leave with their purchase. Maybe a museum, you got something from the gift shop. So online shopping, very similar to the experience you would have maybe going to a museum's website or interacting in that typical web space. So now the advantage, no transportation. You get there just about instantly. In a few seconds, you can be there. Limitless options. Really, you can just look and peruse wherever you like very quickly, moving from space to space. You get the understanding of what other people have received, working with that. But you're limited. Manufacturer photos, same thing museum. You're just dealing with typically 2D photos, maybe some video to help give some understanding of it. But there's really a limited understanding of scale. And that's where augmented shopping comes in. And same thing with the history space. So there's the value of no transportation. You don't have to go anywhere. You're right in your home. Limitless options. You have just a huge swath of things to see, and very, very quickly. You don't have to move around a space or go to a different store in order to see competing brands. And you also have, but it's engaging. You get the feeling of something in the room with you. You get to point your phone or your tablet at, say, your coffee table or desk or wall or floor, and you can see and engage that object in the same space as you. And for anyone who hasn't played with some AR, I would highly recommend it. It is really amazing to see an object just floating on your surface, and you can walk around it. And because your camera understands to some degree how its position in comparison to that object, you can see it, and you can see different angles of it as you move. So you really get that feeling that you're in the same room as this object. And so you also get that scale and connection to it. And why is this all important? And the reason I bring up retail is because they've done some of this research, right? They have a much easier way to track this. But TechCrunch reported that users, and this is pre-pandemic information, so I'd be really interested to see what is going on next, but users are 11 times more likely to purchase, according to TechCrunch, when using an augmented or virtual reality system versus versus just standard, more typical online shopping. Fathead found that their returns were reduced by 50%, so quite a bit less waste there, and the ability that the customers really felt and understood what they were going to get beforehand. So there's a really good connection. And so I wanted to kind of outline all of this information as I hand things off to Dr. Abbass, so everybody can understand where some of this value comes. And so I hope I did that. And with that, I want to introduce Dr. Kathyabbas from the Rhode Island Marine Archeology Project. She's the principal investigator as well as executive director. And I am very grateful to have worked with her and continue working with her on being able to digitize some of the artifacts that they've been able to excavate. And with that, I will hand things off.
So what Chris has been talking about is public engagement. And what I want to do is spend some time to introduce to you the Rhode Island Marine Archeology Project and how we incorporate the public in professionally directed maritime history studies. But also in today's presentation, we need to talk about how this technology is used for data collection, as well as sharing the information with the public on the end. So what we do is we train members of the public in the basics of what they need to do, and then we evaluate their skills, and people who are divers can volunteer in diving, but there's a lot of other things that the folks can do who might be interested in this, and we also do a lot of sites that are not even underwater. What you see here is the kind of field work that we do that is diving field work, and we started in 1992 when the state asked us to start this program incorporating the public, and we did our first field work in 1993. And of course, we're still conducting field work even now. With the pandemic that's been going on, we have been very careful about how we go out and do this. But you know, if you're underwater, you're probably in the safest place in the world from the virus. Here you can see a variety of the different kinds of sites we do, and there is as much maritime history on land in a state like Rhode Island as there is underwater, because every community in our state contributed to the various maritime activities that were part of our historic economic structure. And so, of course, all of those businesses that were along the shore and even inland that contributed resources and the like are still there. At least that's part of the history and part of the archaeology. So we work all around the state. All right, now I'd like to talk a little bit about the various kinds of 3D imaging and other technologies that we've used for data collection. First of all, Multibeam Sonar, which you saw in an earlier panel, the sonar and sub-bottom profiling that everybody thinks is what marine archaeology is all about, is very important for finding sites, but it's only about 5% of what we do when we do an archaeological study. The interesting thing about that kind of technology is that it uses sound waves, not light, but it also can be converted if you have multi-beam systems. Multi-beam data, which you can see on the NOAA website, can be converted into making 3D images of what you actually see underwater. It's not as detailed as actually doing the work by hand, but if you want to see something underwater, that gives you a really good way of doing it just by dragging the 3D imaging through the water, and then you can convert it to that printed model. Other kinds of 3D imaging is what you see in the upper right-hand corner of that particular slide, which is a 3D image of the site that we think may be the Endeavour. And that was done by the Australian National Maritime Museum, the partner of the RIMAP folks. And what we are doing with that is taking pieces of this vessel, and then they do like 10,000 photographs, and it's the software that stitches it all together and you get a 3D image that then you can rotate on your screen and see in 3D views. That's very similar to what Chris did for us in the small artifacts at the lab. Another way we've used this technology is that Hasbro Children's Hospital has been doing CAT scanning for us, which is how we first met Chris, is through connections there. And we still hope to do more of that because the CAT scan can not only show you what's on the outside, but you can fly through the middle of the artifact itself. It was explained to me when we started this that this technology is used to find the tumor that's in your liver. And if it can fly through and find a tumor into your liver, it can tell us what's the inside of a metal concretion. So that's really exciting. And then, of course, what Chris has done for us is to come into the lab and do some small artifacts that we have that we'd like to see a little bit closer with 3D. Share that with the general public who can get to our website. Next one, please. And our lab is now at the Hershoff Museum in Bristol, Rhode Island. It was sponsored by the Australian National Maritime Museum, and so we were able to take care of the artifacts that were retrieved from the excavation. Part of the study of the artifacts is not only conserving them so that they'll last after they're taken out of the, and we also measure, photograph, do all of those, but also the kind of 3D imaging that Chris is doing is very important because it provides us data that we might not otherwise be able to capture, and also we can share with the general public. And of course, the question is, have we found the Endeavor? We've done more than 80 other projects throughout the state in almost 30 years, and none of them gets the kind of publicity that this one has generated internationally. But the thing is that that particular site is difficult to identify because there are so many vessels in the same, but we're closing in on it and we're looking for the diagnostic piece that might tell us that this is the Lord Sandwich, which was the name of the vessel at the time, and therefore is the Endeavor. All of the artifacts that have come off of these ships, and particularly off of this one as well, they're all 18th century artifacts. They're absolutely similar to what you'd find on any particular ship that comes from that period, but we have not yet found the one thing that says this is the Endeavor and nothing else. And that's why I asked Chris to mount this particular image. Sometimes it's not the big data, not the big images, not the big artifacts that will tell you the most about a shipwreck site. Sometimes it's a tiny little piece that might otherwise get overlooked. We know that the Lord Sandwich had been the Endeavor when she went around the world with Captain Cook, but she came to North America carrying Hessian troops to serve in the American Revolution. She was brought to Newport and served as a prison ship. And during the time she had prisoners on board, one of them was John Townsend, the great cabinet maker that everybody knows about because his furniture now is so expensive. And this little handle was the first thing that we saw that was unusual. It's not a piece of the ship's rigging, it's not a piece of the structure, but could it have come from a cabinet maker's toolbox or something like that? There's no evidence yet to prove that that's what this is. So this is just a wild hypothesis, but it's the sort of thing that we're looking for that will say this is associated with the Lord Sandwich because it's associated with somebody we know was on board the Lord Sandwich. And since we know everything associated with Cook probably disappeared years before the vessel came to Newport, it's important to prove that we have found the Lord Sandwich. And if we have the Lord Sandwich, of course, we have the Endeavor. So is it possible that this little handle, if we could prove that it was associated with John Townsend, we know John Townsend was a prisoner on board the Lord Sandwich, and we know the Lord Sandwich was the Endeavor, this tiny little artifact might be the critical piece of evidence to prove which ship that particular site might be. And so, of course, being able to mount this as an image that people can see close up, can turn it around, look at it from all different views, that's an exciting thing to be able to share with the public. But also it allows us to see and collect data that otherwise we might miss. So we're very excited to have Chris help us with this. So the last panel just summarizes all of that, and I'd like to encourage all of you to share the information about the Rhode Island Marine Archaeology Project, because we are open to the public, and generally people have some sort of skills we can incorporate into our program. You don't have to be a professional, you don't have to be a student, you just have to be willing to volunteer and learn how we do things and share the excitement of what we do. So Chris, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And to kind of go along with that, let me switch over and just give people a taste of what you were talking about with that handle. So here is that data in full 3D, and this is not a recording. This is me moving this around in my Sketchfab account, and here's the 3D data, and we can zoom in on it. We can see some of the details Kathy was talking about. And be able to really get an understanding, and you can use this if you had it on your phone or tablet. You'd be able to also project it in augmented reality, like I was talking about, so you could three-dimensionally place it in your space and understand its size and get close to it and move around it. Here's another larger scan I did. This is Abraham Lincoln. This is in Roger Williams Park. So it's kind of going to the two extremes. So he's about 35 feet tall. I was able to take both of these, and this information isn't great for just viewing, but we can also completely create full three-dimensional representations that we can touch and feel. So now people have the ability to really hold on to something, and you can imagine the value that this would bring to many facets of the historical world, being able to physically recreate something that you can touch and hold, place on a shelf. I mean, we've all been to those gift stores that don't. There's always like these. Yeah, it doesn't look quite right, but you could have a fully three-dimensional copy. Go ahead, Dr. Abbass.
Yes. And one of the early slides complained about the fact that we don't have any money from the state. And of course, there's always competition in nonprofits for funding and selling that sort of thing. You can't sell artifacts. You can't do that. But if you have copies, and if by some wild possibility that turns out to be the key to prove it's the endeavor, can you imagine what that little piece in his hand might be sold for in museum shops? As the CEO trying to raise money for the organization, I drool at the possibility of using that as an economic benefit to our organization as well. But it's a very complicated series of intersecting economic spheres that we're talking about here, because I'm talking about research and data and all of that, and he's talking about how you use it also to share with the public and eventually to market. So it's very exciting.
Thanks, Dr. Abbass. Yeah. I can say this piece right here, I did not touch it. Dr. Abbass and her assistant were the only ones to handle it. They put it on my turntable and it spun around, but I did not touch the actual artifact. So to be able to really handle it and feel some of the variations and little cracks and crevices and areas where it was eroded a bit by the salt water is really fun. And then here's a little copy of President Lincoln right there that I now have, and you can see him on my big screen as well. So I was able to take that and recreate it in a physical form rather than just through a digital medium that you can see on a screen. So that's really exciting as well. So engaging through technology is really important for what we're doing, and to kind of demonstrate some of the other areas. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. I called on the Met in a previous role of mine, so I've worked with some of the people that worked on this project, and it was very exciting to see this, and I wanted to share it as well. This one is really amazing. If you follow the link here, and it only works, unfortunately, with iOS devices, so you need to have like an iPhone or an iPad, more recent one as well. But right in the web page, you can see the object and see this this sculpture. And there's even they one-upped it because they even added a voiceover. So it's a really amazing way to interact, understand, and learn something while you're kind of seeing this object in space, in your office, in your living room. You get to engage in a way that photos just, I don't think, produce that kind of reaction. And I think the data, particularly around shopping, kind of highlights that. And then we're good on time. The Smithsonian is probably the largest organization working with this kind of stuff, and they've been doing this for quite a while now. The most probably the biggest one, and some of you may have read or seen some of the work that they've done, was on the Apollo 11, the 50th anniversary stuff that they did last year. Was really impressive. They used a multitude of technologies, capture technologies, to create the information that they've shared here. And it's really impressive, and that's a pretty easy link to get to, 3d.si.edu, and I would highly recommend anybody to go ahead and check it out. And I like to conclude any discussion of technology with people that are like, well, we've always done it this way. And here's an example of, these are architects and engineers and civil engineers, and you can see them just sprawled out, taking up so much space just trying to put a drawing together. You can see how big these documents are that they're working on, and the amount of inefficiency I'm sure you can imagine in doing it this way versus now. You would expect nothing more than someone to be in front of their computer working on a drawing of a building or a site plan. And the amount of space that they take up, the ability to share and move that data around between desks or offices, or even around the world, you can do that very easily with modern methods. And so technology really consistently brings us forward and makes things a lot more accessible to so many more people. And with that, I would like to thank you all. I appreciate your time and opportunity to share both what Functional 3D is working on, as well as RIMAP and what we're doing there. And so I'll leave this up for a bit. You got both our websites on here, as well as direct emails if you'd like to reach out to us. And Avi and Amy, do we got some time for questions? Did we have any questions? I haven't even popped over to the chat yet to see.
Yeah, so we have a few minutes for questions, and so folks, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in there, or if there's a pause, feel free to ask. I'm gonna kick it off while people get their thoughts together, and ask, what do you see next for 3D scanning? Like, what kind of technologies are we missing out on currently? Do you see, and where do you see this going in a couple, 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, 5 to 10. I mean, we've already started to see Facebook try to take regular images and 3Dify them. So they're using some AI to kind of fake it from the information they can gather from and if you move around it, you can kind of see, like, you'll have a subject, and you'll see a little blurring behind them as you kind of move them. So to me, it takes me out of it, just because I'm so used to the real deal stuff. But it's pretty amazing that they're able to kind of put in the hands of everyone else. You're even seeing some of the technology and come down to the iPad Pro. So it has a depth sensor on it as well. So the newest iPad Pro can do some rough understanding. The reason Apple put that in is to enhance that augmented reality experience. That's the main purpose of it being in there, to be able to capture in that desk area and really understand where it is in space, give it a lot better understanding. And so now it can place that object, whether it be Pikachu because you're playing Pokemon Go, or an artifact or a statue, it can, or something you're shopping for. That's, I think, some of the biggest things. So we're going to see augmented reality, especially with the challenges of COVID, that has become huge. And so I think we're going to feel it more in our day-to-day life. We're going to be more engaged with it and see it more often and get that push in that direction, because it's definitely nothing new. I think many of us have probably seen or heard of it for a few years now, of what augmented reality can do, but it just hasn't been put in front of us like I think we're going to see in the coming year or two.
Yeah, it's great to hear. Well, you talked a little bit about, you showed some figurines that were 3D printed. I love your little proto G.I. Joe set you have there of, American presidents.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you see 3D scanning going? Will we see a time soon where people can take these images and be able to print them at home?
So yeah, the recreation, I think a quick recreation and being able to scale a large object down, losing detail or things that aren't perfect can be kind of compensated for because you've shrunk it down so much. Same could be thought of in photography, right? I mean, if you take a 5 megapixel image and you put it this big, it's not a big deal, but it's when you try to actually keep things. So I think the challenge at this point in time is really the way that they're working with the data. It is quite large. It's quite unwieldy. There are multiple workflows. So I think probably in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see more come down between AI being able to process this data in the cloud. You'll see more in regards to the ability to work with this data. As connection speeds get faster, as hard drives get bigger, right? We're going to always see those kind of advancements happen. Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, but it's a fun challenge for me. I love it. And so the photogrammetry is something that just about anybody can do. There's some open source options if anybody's interested in testing it out, playing around with it. But yeah, it can get pretty challenging and frustrating.
And we have a question from Aaron Olson. Aaron, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Chris the question directly?
Sure. Yeah, that was a great presentation, Chris. That was really neat. Thanks for sharing. I wondered, just curious, where most of your business is coming from at this point. Is it mostly outdoor or inside building surveying, large scale local projects? Or are you also getting out of state services where people then ship you something to scan? Because just thinking about, I know there are other scanning services available, and if you could ship anywhere, is your competition like you're competing with any scanning service that can accept packages from elsewhere? So I don't know if it's easier to then get business from inside the state where they want someone local who can come out and take the photos as you're doing and do the scans.
Yeah, great question. So it is all over the place. As you saw, reality capture, as kind of the term is for 3D capture, is really useful, and anytime measurements are of value, it comes in handy. So I've done some work in New York City scanning rooftops for the 5G, for some of the 5G rollout. They want to be able to just the engineers can sit in the office and digitally lay out where those cables are going to go and how long they need. So when they go on site, they've got everything. And I liken it back again to Tooney's obsession with efficiency, right? Reduce the consumption of materials, and it's going to save everywhere. So that's one of them. Yeah, as mentioned, yeah, anything. I'm working with a startup retailer that's looking to have service providers for people that are looking to put their goods in 3D on the web. So they have a web platform, but this is not something, as kind of Avi discussed, this is not something everybody can just do or pick up, and to get it to look great takes time and knowledge and understanding. And so having a quick turnaround and being able to do that. It can be shipped. Of course, local is always nice because you get that immediate feedback. So there's that as well. So there's some travel involved. There's some shipping involved, and there's some local. With Dr. Abbass and the Rhode Island Marine Archaeology Project. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely focused locally, personally. I want to engage in my community and really support all the activities. And I think there's huge value, right? Both in cost and time. And so being able to educate my local community and on that is really important to me. And bringing that value so that way to help them grow. I think is important, and it really is.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for the great presentation, echoing Aaron's words as well. And I think it was mentioned earlier, but Chris is a great member of the community. We've seen him a bunch in the past few months. So we thank you so much. And